today we're going to talk about coercive control. Not all coercive controllers are narcissists. However, almost all narcissists use coercive control. Today I'm going to be interviewing two guests. You all have probably heard of Christine Cocchiola, and her co-author of her upcoming book is Amy Polacko. And they have built and written a book and put together a compilation of coercive control stories, real life stories of people who have gone through this, to help understand, to help educate the court system, to educate judges, to educate lawyers. This is what it looks like. This is a real thing, and we have to understand that it's often manipulation on top of manipulation, blaming the victim and them claiming their own victim title, right? So let's go meet Christine and Amy and talk about coercive control and the dangers and what you're going to learn in their book. So let's go meet them. Hi, Amy. Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
Thank you for having
I am
us.
so excited about your upcoming book. It's called Framed, right? There it is. Yay, 2 copies in hand. Awesome. And I want to know, what was the impetus for you guys to write this? How did, and then we'll go into what it's about, but like, there's always a why. What's going on here?
I didn't expect this question twice today, Amy, right? So yeah, I mean, Amy and I have been doing this work for a long time, and we're just so committed to our clients. I came to Amy earlier in the year, like early in September or something, and just said, Amy, what if we put all these stories together that we are always sharing together in conversations, obviously keeping clients anonymous, but like, what if we just put them in a book? Because it would validate the experiences of our clients, and everyone maybe would feel less isolated, but more than that, it would be a warning. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
and
that
Amy said, yes, let's do it.
yeah, I was all in because I think we also feel that if people heard these stories, if they read these stories, they would be just as blown away as we are, even though we're hearing them every day. They still hit us so hard right here, and we don't want to upset the readers, but we want to motivate them into action.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of validation when people hear someone else's story. It's like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Or it becomes less personal because it becomes more, oh, this is what they do. This is how it goes. And again, I had 3,000 people submit stories for my book. And you must have interviewed and had a lot of people that you've put into this book. It's for women, right? Who is it for? Who's the book for specifically?
Go ahead, Amy.
It is for all women, but I have to say that, Tracy, your book is incredible because I recommend it to all my divorce coaching clients. I told her it is the Bible on divorcing a narcissist. So, we hope that ours is half as good as yours is. But I'm sorry, you said the question was,
So, was it just for women?
oh, for women, yes. It's for everybody. We want all women to read this, but also we want all men who care about women to read this. And we're telling people, even if you might think you're not getting divorced or not in this situation, you could be. You could be happily married right now. You could be dating, you never know. And it could be your child, your sister, your friend. So absolutely everyone should read this book, and that's something that Tina Swithin said, actually, from One Mom's Battle. So we trust her, right? She wrote our epilogue, which we're very grateful for.
Yay! She contributed to my book too. She's awesome. So I think it's important that, again, getting out these stories and they get heard, right? Even though they know there's sort of a compilation on their story, but at the same time, the validation that comes with it is absolutely like, you can't get it anywhere else. And people go into support groups, they go in and they hear, okay, sounds familiar, but it's not exactly. And so tell me about some of the stories that are in there.
Sure. I think it's important to also like highlight, right? Dr. Ramani wrote our foreword and she calls it this industrial divorce like complex. It's like a world of what happens to people when they try to escape an abusive relationship. And we've talked about this before, Tracy, right? Like this idea that abusers will do anything to wield control. They'll use the system and they will use the children. And that these stories are about women, but it's actually also all of these women are mothers and they were trying to protect their children and they had no idea what they were getting themselves into. They, like so many of us, went into these relationships. I think Amy uses the words in her introduction, a babe in the woods, like they went into it thinking, oh, he's a great guy. He's wonderful. And I say he, as you know, abusers can be female, but they don't have the same ability. Women do not have the same ability historically to use the court system in such a harmful way. It's about the moneyed parent, it's about the parent who has more power, it's about men in general who have more power. And like Amy said, we want dads to read this book. We want, brothers and, partners of people and just really have investment in this idea that there is a whole, we call it the woman in the family court underworld, because it is a whole underworld that's going on right now. Yeah.
It's the things that we hear, and you all know I have my button, you can't make this shit up. But the court systems are so stacked against the females. And the battles that some of my clients have had, and they're just not believed. And it's like, this is what's really happening. And but then the abuser pulls the next trick and pulls the next trick and turns the light on you because they've called child protective services 83 times and now they get to go see. And the court goes, well, 83 times is an awful lot, young lady. And they're like, but I didn't do all these things. It is an underworld of corruption and favoritism. And women are already at a disadvantage in the workplace and everything else. So when they're in the courtroom, there's, I think, no worse place that they are less represented and less believed. How do you guys think about that?
I think the data shows that. I mean, Joan Mayer's study, which we cite in our book, shows that less than half of women are believed when they report all kinds of abuse. So we see that all the time. And to your point, Tracy, our society at large does not get this. I think most people, if you went out on the street, I'm a former TV reporter, right? If I asked 100 people, who gets custody, do I, oh, women, people really have this misconception. They have no idea what's going on in family court. And you know that these divorces are often labeled high conflict. When there is a high conflict spouse, there's an abuser and there's a victim, right? As Dr. C always says, we have to pivot to the perpetrator here. So, we hope that this book busts a lot of these myths and educates people who have no idea what goes on. The three of us do, and many of the women in our clients do, but there's a whole world out there that really needs to read Framed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If we can educate court professionals, so this book is a compilation of stories, but at the end of each story, Amy and I give our notes about like what actually happened here, what were the tactics the abuser used, and research based like information so that when somebody's reading it, and again, we say this is not an easy read, but it is a must read. And so this idea that if we could get like guardian ad litems and custody evaluators to be reading this, attorneys and judges, I think part of the problem that the book actually depicts, which is sad, is that a lot of these people do know that the women are being mistreated, but they're not leveling up and doing the right thing integrity wise. And I'm not saying everyone, but I think there's a lot of there are ethical violations happening left and right all of the time that put women, and most importantly, for God's sakes, children in harm's way. So it's really troubling. But again, if we can validate experiences, if we can give a couple of people in the system who are like, whoa, wait a minute, this really happens. Yes, it really happens.
I would imagine that there would be a door to have judges look at it as well, because technically they're trying the cases and they often don't see the perpetrator for a perpetrator, right? They come on so charming, they're more professional, whereas the victim is like, yeah, and nobody understands that that's what a victim looks like. Let's go back to Gabby Petito on the side of the road. We know what she looked like, but the police didn't know. They were like, she seems to be like the problem one because she was freaking out, right? And so this is something that I think if judges could see and listen, how are you guys going to get it to judges and the people like that, the GALs, like you guys said, this is their job to do it, but too often, and I know in my world, the GAL sides with the abuser. They are like, oh, yeah, they aren't looking at the I don't know, the evidence. They're listening to the charm in the cases I've had.
Yeah, and I think what happens oftentimes, and I did the guardian ad litem training here in the state of Connecticut just for like, intel information. And really what I ended up finding out is that there's not a lot of talk about what the covert abuses are. So people think of domestic violence as violent, right? But the reality is the violent incident model is archaic. I mean, violence happens, but coercive control is the underpinning of it all. And that if I'm an abuser, I'm going to use all of these covert tactics to really impact you psychologically and harm you and harm the children. But the court system isn't willing to see that. And frankly, even when they do see physical violence, GALs are supposed to create equality in parenting. I mean, that's really what the training is about, is 50-50 regardless. And it's really problematic, because how could we say that a child belongs 50% of the time with someone they witnessed, quote unquote, which means they truly experienced their mother being abused. And that's with physical violence. So what of all of the non-physically violent circumstances? So I think there's a problem because my experience has been, if you want to remain a GAL, if you want to keep getting called by the judge or the attorney, that if you want people to say, oh, that GAL, she's good, you have to be someone who's going for 50-50 most of the time. Nobody's going to say, oh, she's actually really good. You know what her bias is? To protect children. Oh, we're going to call on her. Nobody does that. And that is the huge, I think, gully that we're trying to bridge over.
It's not a gully, it's a river. It's like huge because there's so many elements to how the system has to change. You guys are talking about the GALs, the lawyers, the courts, the things like that. But academia needs to know. Academia needs to teach their therapist a little bit differently as well. And I was working with Dr. Romney for a long time in a group, and Tina was in it, and she would tell us academia doesn't want to hear about Pete Walker's book on CPTSD. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to break out of what they've traditionally taught when the world has actually changed. And we have to change how we teach people to look for this hidden abuse, to look for the telltale signs of someone who is a victim versus someone who is pretending to be a victim. That's I see the problem is, hey, they put up that flag, I'm the victim, no, I'm the victim, and then it's really hard to jump off that wall and be like, let me prove it to you, right?
Yeah, and to Christine's point about the GALs, I mean, they're looking out for themselves, and attorneys are looking out for themselves. I mean, we have attorneys all the time who are not willing to go to bat for their clients, not willing to bring up the naughty word domestic abuse or tell their client, don't bring it up no matter what. And to answer your question, Tracy, I think many of the women who are waiting for Frame to come out are planning to buy multiple copies to give to the judge and the GALs, and we are going to be reaching out to GALs. We hope they voluntarily read this book. One of the things I believe about it is that they're not going to choose to change. They're like all great social justice movements we've had in history. We've got to shine a light on this and make them almost ashamed of what is going on. Because, in Connecticut, we've got Jennifer's Law named for Jennifer Doulos. It's not being used as much as it should. Everybody's afraid to use it. Nobody wants to tick off the judge. I wrote an article for Ms. about this. I mean, there has to be consequences for not executing this law, right? So that's the situation we're in, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And we've all seen those stories that, again, we just wish someone would listen. And the survivors are just trying so hard, and they're just like they get so exhausted from fighting a battle that the judge doesn't listen to. Their lawyer is, I have one that her husband was physically violent, and the judge is like, well, if we slap him with the DV, he'll get his guns taken away. And I'm like, that's the point. He's dangerous. We have to do something, right? It's not look out for, oh, if I take someone's guns away. If they have beaten someone, that should be without question. And that there's a hesitance of, again, like Amy said, well, this could look bad on my report card of people that I don't support this, or I do that, or I'm a man hater, or I'm a this. It's a fine line, I think. And I'm so glad that you guys are doing this. Do you have any excerpts from the book that you want to share? Is there anything that will help us see what's in there?
Sure, sure. And I just wanted to just, if I can circle really quickly back to, I think what you're talking about, right, is patriarchy.
Mhm.
And the reality is every time somebody says the word patriarchy, not all men, but a lot of men get their backs up against the wall and defensive. And patriarchy harms both men and women and boys and girls. I mean, it's harming our little boys to grow up in a world where they feel they can't be emotive and can't share how they truly feel. And so we have to educate people. And I think part of the problem is the system is run by people who actually align very well with patriarchal norms. So it sounds like a pipe dream, but I keep saying we have to infiltrate the system with good people. That's what we have to do. People who actually care. Because how could you look this way and not care? I have a mom in Ohio right now, and there is someone who is one of the smaller state reps, but his daughter is experiencing it. And
Now
all
we
of a sudden he's concerned, which is fantastic. But it takes it hitting home for you and recognizing how personal this could be. And it really is an epidemic. It's much more prevalent than anybody could ever imagine. So yeah, Amy, do you want to read your excerpt or?
Sure. We'll give you a little sampling for all the listeners of a couple of our stories. This one is Lucy. And to give you a little background, she had moved all over the country with her husband, who was a successful businessman in the corporate world. They had several children. And it's called spiritual abuse because he actually kind of weaponized the church and religion in their lives. He started going to a church that said women should be subservient and know their place. And all of the church elders and the entire church community supported him in his abuse of her. So this is just a little snippet of her story. In 2020, at the height of quarantine during the global COVID-19 pandemic, I told my abuser that I wanted to get divorced. He reacted with pure hatred and ramped up his abuse. My abuser prevented me from leaving the house for a month, cut off my access to money, weaponized the kids against me, turned my friends against me, and conspired with leaders of the church during daily hours-long phone calls. They were working together to have me institutionalized. The next month, he ignited a bedtime disagreement between me and my son, manufactured a scene, and crafted a story so egregious that I was taken from my children and home in handcuffs. Having no money and no family nearby, I went to stay with a friend in the area for what I thought was a few days, but ended up being 5 months. Following the arrest, my abuser crafted a narrative from mistakes and shortcomings that had surfaced during my years living under duress and used it to justify his cruelty. He blocked all contact with my children by filing restraining orders and refused to relent unless I would agree to plead guilty to the false charges and go to inpatient psychiatric treatment. There was a complete separation of 8 months with no contact between me and my children. As a result of his obstruction, aggressive legal strategies, and court closures from COVID that have lasted for years. After I saw the kids with a court-appointed supervisor for 3 hours per week, my abuser began to allege abuse by me and the supervisor against my children. I endured weekly 3-hour supervised visits for 2.5 years. After the children's visits with me, my abuser would interrogate the kids. He made scheduling my parenting time nearly impossible. The school bought my ex's story and helped him keep me out of the kids' lives by refusing to speak to me, provide info, or allow my involvement, despite the court ordering it. It was the same with the therapist.
Wow, you made a really valid one in there with the schools. Hear that a lot too, where they're like blocking them, and God, that's a so sad story, but it's so common, isn't it? It's so sad that this level of turnaround happens. Christine, did you have one too?
I did. I mean, I think to your point, there's such malicious intent, right? It really is. So the little bit of the backstory of this is called the Ivy League scandal. And this mom figured out that the father had helped support the child do false applications to Ivy League schools. And she was attempting to hold them accountable. So I'll start from there. As I'm sure most can imagine, these attempts by me to right a wrong, to give clarity to the harmful systems that betrayed me and my children, and more importantly, to show my children who their father really is, only incited my abuser more. All the while, I was seeing my sons at his discretion, and as we know with many of these abusers, the smear campaign intensified. I defended myself against false claims of child abuse using mediators to draft a fair parenting agreement my ex loosely followed, and relied on the courts to rein him in. He had instructed our older boys to record our private conversations during my parenting time, and then use those illegal recordings to undermine my parental authority and shame me. Eventually, Mark's use of these systems and the manipulation of my children and the chaos he had created in my home with our boys became overwhelming. He drained my savings and pushed me into a deep depression. As a result, I became destabilized and confrontational. I installed security cameras due to his abuse claims to protect myself from further allegations. One of my sons became physically abusive, and I feared for my safety. Visits by the local police at my ex's request were becoming commonplace during my custody time. I felt my boys slipping away, and at the same time, I was detaching from them. My once sweet and loving relationship with my sons was fractured because I had dared to leave an abusive marriage and expose the college application fraud. I had to redefine what motherhood meant to me. I could no longer parent in the way I had envisioned long ago. My ex's need for control overshadowed my basic needs to grow and thrive, and I watched my ex begin to do the same to our boys. For our oldest, my 16-year-old, this meant denying him a chance to grow into an independent young adult.
Wow. And you made another good point of what they do to you, it then turns the lens to the kids. And that's I mean, it's not that it's not criminal for the mother or the other parent in this situation, but then the kids get destroyed. And this is an epidemic, guys, and I am so grateful. I can't wait to get my hands on this book, and I can't wait to tell everybody about it, because it's exactly what people need to hear. And thank you so much for doing this and putting your heads together to bring this to the world. I will share it with everyone I know. So is there anything else you guys want to close with? Did we forget anything?
Just thank you, Tracy, and thank you so much. And we could have had thousands of stories in this book, as you know. The book will be on pre-order pretty soon. It will be out October 1st. That's our release date to coincide with Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we're going to be doing some workshops called the Abuser's Playbook for people who purchase the book. And we're excited about that because as you see, our hearts are really in educating and empowering women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We appreciate all that you do. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. I hope you guys found that helpful. Aren't they amazing? I just love the two of them, and I cannot wait to get the book in my hand, because as much as it sounds like these stories are not going to be easy to hear, we need to hear them. Everyone needs to understand this. And if you are looking for some evidence to maybe show your lawyer, to show your GAL, to educate your family, to show them you're not alone, this is what's happening to you, and this is what happens to so many others, pick up their book. It's called Framed. It'll be out. We're going to put the pre-order link down below. And again, this is Tracy Malone. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you like this. Please like and share it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And I will see you again soon. Thank you.